senior economist and consultant at the United Nations Development Program in Afghanistan, and he joins me now live from Silver Spring, Maryland. Thank you very much, Michel, for joining us here on TRT World. Now, before I talk about the worsening humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, let me ask you, isn't it odd that the United Nations is reportedly planning to send money to the Taliban when literally no country in the entire world recognizes the Taliban government?
Okay, well, thank you for having me on the program. I'd like to state, however, that what I'm saying now will be in my personal opinion and not the official view of UNDP or my employer. I believe that it's not really as surprising as it may sound. The UN generally does pay for security in almost all countries. I have worked with the UN in Somalia, and definitely the UNDP was paying, the UN was paying salaries for guards to warlords who were semi-legitimate government authorities. So I think this is more striking because the Taliban is very much in the eyes of the US right now. But I don't believe it's such an outlandish concept. The amount and everything must be computed. I guess it is a large country. It has a number of installations and staff. In fact, the Taliban have escorted UN staff ever since the UN went back into Afghanistan, escorting them around for their own security. And I believe that was welcomed by UN staff members at the time. It can be made a sensational story, though it is not. I recall a case in Somalia where the UN left Mogadishu for 5-6 years. And when it got back, it tried to go to its compound, and the guard said, sorry, you have to pay us our salary over the past 5 years because we watched the compound in your absence. So the UN didn't have much choice, of course. To have discontented armed guards around your camp is not a good idea. So therefore, I think this will blow over.
Okay. Now, Michel, let's talk about the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Certainly, it is exacerbating on a daily basis. Reports tell us that up to 1 million children could die due to malnutrition. Now, tell me, how much amount of funds does Afghanistan need to meet some of the most basic necessities of life?
Well, thank you. This is, I think, a vastly more important question than the question of paying guards. I believe some of the proposals discussed yesterday by Professor Merabi have a lot of merit. The possibility of $150 to $200 million a month would go a long way to ease the plight of Afghans. For instance, the Afghanistan imports 80% of its electricity. Now, 80% of it comes from 3 countries, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. That costs about $200 million a year and keeps about 15 million people with light. The U.S. could allow the UN, some UN agency, to take the money from the reserves and pay the utilities of these 3 states, and Taliban wouldn't see a penny of it, and yet 15 million Afghans could benefit from electricity. The other main things are that Afghanistan imports most of its basic food. It has agriculture, but this year it is having a very bad harvest because of a drought. And it doesn't have the money to import food. It is as basic as that. A plan could be devised whereby a UN agency or similar could be asked to account for the funds that it disbursed on behalf of people who buy food, or finance the trade in food from the neighboring countries that it mostly comes from. So I believe that a relaxation of the strictures is very much desirable, especially now that 40 members of the U.S. House have asked for it.
Right, but I would. So now we know that now we know the amount the amount of funds Afghanistan needs at this point to solve its humanitarian crisis. Help us understand which segments of the Afghan society need it the most. Well,
Afghanistan is a country where at the moment you have maybe 60% of people living in poverty. It may go higher soon. So practically everybody is in need of food, including people who normally provide it for themselves, namely the subsistence farmers, who are a large number, make up maybe 30 or 40% of the population to this day. Even these people now require food. And the point, there's some inflation going on in Afghanistan, essentially because of the scarcity of goods. It is not a monetary phenomenon. It is the scarcity of goods that makes the prices low. Not to sound paradoxical, but the monetary situation in Afghanistan itself is more or less recessive. It's restrictive because they cannot print money and the dollar inflow has been cut. Therefore, if it were a normal year, prices would be falling in Afghanistan. However, they are rising because of the shortage of every kind of good, especially basic foodstuffs and medicines.
All right. Certainly, the current situation in Afghanistan is tragic, to say the least. Michel Del Buono, thank you very much for talking to us here on TRT World. We really appreciate your analysis, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.